Navigating the world of services for those with intellectual and developmental disabilities can be confusing. On this episode, hear from area experts who will offer advice and step-by-step instructions on accessing resources and supports right here in Johnson County.
Whether you live in or just love Johnson County, Kansas, JoCo on the Go has everything Johnson County. Here's what's happening and what's coming up in the community you call home.
Thanks for joining us for JoCo on the Go. I'm your host, Theresa Freed, a Johnson County resident and employee of Johnson County government. Parents know making sure your children have every opportunity to reach their potential and have the supports and services they need to thrive is a top priority. But when your child has an intellectual or developmental disability, getting the help you need for your child can be a challenge. But it doesn't have to be. We've got a great group of experts on this episode today to talk us through the ins and outs of getting services. So let's start with some introductions. If you want to tell us your name and your role, we'll go ahead and start with Mandy and then go to Seth and then Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Mandy Flower. I am the Johnson County CDDO Director. I oversee our CDDO, and what we do is we provide IDD services to folks in Johnson County. We help with eligibility determinations and then oversight of the agencies that provide those services.
I'm Seth Kilber. I also work for the CDDO. I do eligibility determination. So I am often one of the first people you're dealing with as an individual is first coming into our system and the CDDO intake and eligibility process. I basically just try to walk people through the entire system from first returning the paperwork to being determined eligible to being determined functionally eligible and just doing some resource referral and coordination.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Coleman. I am the Family Discipline Mentor and Family Support Coordinator at the University of Kansas Medical Center with the Kansas LEND program. LEND stands for Leadership Education in Neurodevelopmental and Related Disabilities. It is a mouthful, hence the word LEND. I also work at the Kansas University Center on Developmental Disabilities in Lawrence. As you can imagine, I wear many hats. At LEND, we are a workforce development training grant. We have short, medium, and long-term opportunities and work with many different disciplines, including family and self-advocates, and training on autism and related disabilities and supporting families as a team. One of the community programs that I support is our Kansas LEND Family Education Series. Monthly, we provide different topics that are meaningful to families across the state of Kansas via Zoom and Facebook Live. If you can't make it to a live session, we are also archive them on our Kansas LEND YouTube page. LEND also works with various community partners such as the CDDO to provide important resources and support.
That's great information there. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of those resources a little bit later as well. So I want to start with Johnson County Developmental Supports. Many great resources there for families with children with intellectual or developmental disabilities. Can you talk a little bit about how we serve this population?
Well, what we do at the CDDO is that we are responsible for helping people determine if they're eligible for IDD services. So those are typically services that will happen after your child has become an adult. We also, as Seth mentioned, he is in charge of doing the eligibility process. So the CDDO is with someone that has an intellectual developmental disability for the duration of their life, from when they enroll in the program, they maintain eligibility, and then they are on the waiting list, which I'm sure we'll get into, and when they go receive services. When they receive those services, then we oversee the agencies that provide those services. Currently, due to COVID, we're still providing all of those services that we were doing before COVID. So Seth is doing eligibilities via webcast and Zoom to ensure that everybody who needs the services has that opportunity. We also have on our CDDO website a list of resources that people can utilize during this time with COVID in regards to PPE and other different resources that are available throughout our community.
For those who don't know what CDDO stands for, can you kind of talk about what that is exactly and how Johnson County serves in that role?
Absolutely. Johnson County CDDO is the Community Developmental Disabilities Organization. And under the DDRA, the Developmental Disabilities Reform Act, they decided that the state was going to be broken up into CDDO catchment areas. And Johnson County is under contract with the state for us to be the CDDO, which that means that we are responsible for the oversight, eligibility, ensuring quality services, and making sure that everybody has a chance to live the life that they choose and that they want to live in their community under the home and community-based services waiver.
Okay, and we'll also talk about that too in a little bit here. So another one of these acronyms, there are lots of them, and we'll try to make sure that we're telling people what they are as we go here. But one important aspect of this process is the IDD waiver. Can you talk about what that is and why that's important for families of children with disabilities?
It's important we kind of understand the history a little bit. These are individuals who historically have been excluded from living in integrated systems and being in and around their home and community. They were often put in institutions. Parents told, he's never going to be able to live a normal life. You might as well just kind of ship him off to a state hospital, something like that. So we're kind of, there's been this movement to keep individuals out of institutional settings and keep them into their homes and their communities where they live, where they grow up, where their families are, where their friends and their peers are. So that's kind of where the push is. And so because the way the funding was set up decades and decades ago, where funding was really prioritizing institutional-like settings, states have now implemented what we call waivers. So a system that essentially allows states to kind of waive this institutional type setting and provide supports in an individual's home and community-based setting. So that's where we get this home and community-based services, or HCBS for short. Yes, we do have a lot of acronyms. So when we talk about the IDD waiver, that's just one of 7 different waivers that Kansas has instituted. And so it specifically targets people with an intellectual or developmental disability who are likely going to need lifelong and ongoing support, usually in the form of some sort of staff assistance, so that they can remain and live in the most integrated and setting possible.
That's a great summary of what this is really all about, and what the intention is behind what we're talking about today. Can you talk a little bit about more why that benefits the individual and then also the families? And then Stephanie, if you can also talk too about the community resources and how those play a role in helping families.
I think that it really is beneficial to the person served with the intellectual or developmental disability, because in previous decades, these people didn't have the opportunity for choice. They didn't have the opportunity to even pick a house where they would like to live, close to their friends and family. And now this is giving them some autonomy back, which they deserve. And they are completely entitled to. We have folks now who are thriving in employment opportunities and just really getting to be a part of their community, like each and every one of us want to be and how they deserve to be. For parents, it's really great, because when you're preparing for the future with any child, you start thinking about, well, what's going to happen? Where are they going to go to college? Things like that. If you get involved with the CDDO or an organization like Stephanie's with Lind, you can find out what's available. Because I know parents, a lot of times, if they have a child that's born with a developmental disability, they might get discouraged and down. And I think that we can provide some hope that there's different opportunities for when they grow up and they can live the life that they want to live. And Stephanie, and I think the key is getting that word out to families for us. We want people to know and see if their loved one is eligible. And Stephanie and her team play a huge role in that.
We have so many good resources and supports and services in the state of Kansas. We just have to get the information out about them. That's what we try to do through the family education series, is do separate sessions and include our partners in those conversations, where we've had the CDDO come and talk. We've had our managed care organizations that run the Medicaid. They were also part of that organization. I think families need to look at a individual's life and say, what supports and services do they need? And then start mapping those out and seeing what those are. You can go to your targeted case manager, which is considered TCM in the abbreviated world, and have them help kind of walk through some ideas of what else can support that individual to live their best life where they want to live. We have resources like Families Together that can help with that information. Like I said, the CDDO and the targeted case managers, Kansas Lend, the University Centers on Excellence in Developmental Disabilities in Lawrence does a lot of research around supported decision-making and self-determination, because it's really important for these individuals to be able to make their own decisions and how they go about doing that.
There are some disabilities that allow for more choice and freedom in making those sorts of decisions. So how do you help families kind of narrow in the best path for their loved one?
To be quite honest, I think it's going to be individual for each person. They really need to sit down with their team of providers and say, what is best for Stephanie? What all does she need in place? She might need the IDD waiver. She might need vocational rehabilitation or VR to help with employment services. They may need day service programs or residential or college programs. There are many college programs coming up throughout the US that support individuals from a degree and non-degree seeking position. So it's really individualized.
So it sounds like with all these resources, the goal really is to help an individual progress in whatever way that is. Whether it's with education or, movement or things like that. And you all are able to help families figure out what the best path is. So can we talk a little bit more about what waivers are available?
So Kansas has 7 different waiver programs, and again, this gets very confusing, but when we talk about waiver programs, we're specifically referencing Medicaid funded programs that help keep people that were traditionally institutionalized, again, out of institutions. So the seven programs, or the 7 waiver programs that Kansas has include obviously this intellectual and developmental disability waiver. We have a frail elderly waiver for individuals over age 65. There is a brain injury waiver. There is a technology assisted waiver for individuals who need rely on some piece of medical equipment. There is a autism waiver for children specifically who meet the autism criteria.
The severe emotional disturbance
Yes.
waiver. So that's if somebody has a severe and a persistent mental illness or a severe emotional disturbance, that goes through our community mental health centers like Johnson County Mental Health. And that was pretty good on that pop quiz, Seth. I think.
Well, we missed in the last one, the physically disabled waiver. So yes, that I think that brings us to 7.
How do people know exactly which one they're supposed to be on?
Each waiver has their different set of criteria. Obviously for a waiver like the frail elderly waiver, that's geared towards individuals over the age of 65. autism waiver, that's geared towards children. I think you have to be under the age of 6 before you can get on that. Again, it's time limited. The KDAD's website, the Kansas Department for Aging and Disability Services, they are the managers of these waiver programs. So their website is probably the most up-to-date information for which waiver a person may be eligible for and has those eligibility requirements, because the waivers not all of them. The IDD waiver is typically a lifelong waiver. So somebody gets on it and is usually on it for as long as they need it. Whereas other waivers, they're more time limited. An individual maybe gets on the waiver and has to progress. And once they show a certain amount of progression, then they either drop off or can transition to another waiver altogether. So yeah, I would say definitely check out the KDAD's website. Again, that's Kansas Department for Aging and Disability Services, to see the 7 different waiver programs and see if, somebody you might be thinking about or possibly yourself qualifies for one of these waivers.
And so can you talk again a little bit about how somebody applies to be on these services? And once they are, what kinds of services, are they immediate? Do people come to you, or are you having to proactively seek out, different information or different programs?
I'll start here, and then Seth can go into more of the eligibility. With ours, the CDDO, we do oversight over the IDD waiver, and that's the intellectual developmental disabilities. And some of the criteria are that it originated at birth, and it manifests before the age of 22. So that's Down syndrome, things like that, Fragile X syndrome, different things of that nature. That also differentiates us from some of those other waivers. Like Seth said, it's lifelong, but that disability had to start at birth or manifest before the age of 22. We have a lot of folks right now who I believe, lived with their family most of their lives, and now they're in their 50s and 60s, and parents are getting older, and, they need to come and get services. So we still have to have that documentation that it was before the age of 22. It's expected Down syndrome, something like that, is expected to continue indefinitely. So it's not something that can be cured. And it restricts the individual's ability to function in major life activities, such as living independently, self-sufficiency, self-care. Someone might not be able to express themselves through language. Those type of things is what this IDD waiver focuses on. And we encourage people, and Seth can talk more about this, we are encouraging children, parents of children, to start looking into these waivers as soon as possible, because the state of Kansas has an 8 3/4 year waiting list. So if you meet with Seth and you do all of the paperwork and the eligibility and you get on the waiting list, you're going to be on the waiting list for 8 years as of right now. So we're strongly encouraging families to contact us, and we can also help with navigating them to the right waiver and all of that stuff.
Mandy, we're actually 2 days shy of a 9-year wait, not to be overly negative here. But that does, that does highlight a distinction here is that wait, that's not the case for all the waivers. Some waivers don't have a waiting list altogether. And that's just kind of the nature of, how some of them are time limited, and they kind of get you on. Maybe you're on for 6 months or a year and you transition off that waiver altogether. But because of the fiscal state of where the state is currently, that list, the IDD waiver has just kind of ballooned into 9 years. And so I think that's part of why we're doing this now, is to get the word out. Just
to be clear, that waiting list is not for all services. Even if you're on the IDD waiver and you're looking at a 9-year wait list, there are services that are still available, right, to families who are needing them.
Yeah, that's specifically that 9-year wait. Once you're on the waiting list, that is specifically for the IDD waivered services. There are other services that you can take part in outside of the IDD waiver, and that we've got community partners and other stakeholders. We understand. I mean, you're a parent. You need the help right away. A lot of times you're in day-to-day survival mode. This process can be very complicated and complex and takes longer. I tell people it's less like registering to vote and a little bit more like, getting a mortgage and having to sign just a stack of paperwork, get records from every which place. So that's part of the reason why we're here, and then why CDDOs were put in place to begin with, because folks and families need kind of that single point of contact and single point of entry to kind of help walk them through the process.
So one of the services that you had mentioned, the home and community-based services, can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like and who qualifies for that?
So once a person has been determined system eligible, we then look at their waiver eligibility, or what we term functional eligibility. And that just is trying to assess whether or not they will actually be eligible for funding. 99% of the time, if somebody is system eligible or they have an intellectual, they meet kind of the basic requirements of the diagnostic criteria of having an intellectual or developmental disability, they're going to be functionally eligible. So the HCBS waiver, the home and community-based service waiver, that is the funding, that is, that primarily what people are trying to obtain. And the services on those, on the IDD waiver specifically, these are things that include residential supports. So, we're looking at these services very widely, really geared around meeting the individual's needs, but this could be living in a group setting with 2 to 5 other roommates, and staff may be there 24 hours a day, helping grocery shop, helping pass meds, just providing some of that supervision, getting people out into the community to do what they need to do to live very integrated lifestyles. Another service is day supports. Like I said, a lot of people are in this, maybe they've got a young one with autism, and they're just in day-to-day survival mode. They go to school during the day while mom and dad are at work, and they come home, they got to do what they got to do. But I try to get people a little forward thinking here. What about when your son or daughter is out of high school? Maybe they're not interested in pursuing, one of these higher education opportunities, or for whatever reason. Obviously they're not going to school anymore. So we've got day supports, and again, varies pretty widely to ones that are really just community-based, going out volunteering, going to public libraries and parks, and just doing different things of that nature, to ones that are a lot more vocational based. So maybe they're working on interview skills or different work-related tasks and skills to try to get individuals in a competitive work environment. And then there's also in-home support. So where maybe you've got a minor child who qualifies for the waiver, and their name comes up on the waiting list, and they can get staff support inside the home, providing some of those supervision needs while in the evening, weekend, whatever the needs kind of dictate again there. I would say those are kind of the lion's share of services that most people utilize, some form of those. The only other one I will mention here real quick is supported employment. So if somebody were to find competitive employment, we do have a service where they can get job coaching on an ongoing, indefinite basis so that they maintain their competitive job.
When you qualify for services and you get on the waiting list, you automatically are eligible for having a case manager, what you will hear referred to as a targeted case manager. And Stephanie mentioned that earlier. And that TCM is very helpful in helping you find those stakeholders, find resources, and which we'll discuss briefly. There's a way to get services before the waiting list, 9 years, which is called the crisis. They can help navigate that as well if you or your family need to pursue that. So their targeted case management will be something that's offered as soon as you're on the waiting list. And we encourage folks, to really look at their options. And again, the CDDO is here to help facilitate choice. So we give a list of all of the case managers in our community, and families can interview them and pick the one that they think will meet their needs. And then with the crisis process, that's a way that we can, if somebody is in a need right now for services, that TCM can play a critical role in helping. As Seth mentioned, a lot of the folks that we're working with, they're busy and they have a lot going on, and it's survival mode. And we understand that, and we feel that that case manager role can really help with some of those situations and get resources or help get the paperwork in, whatever it may be.
So you mentioned the case management role. So is that separate from a care coordinator?
A care coordinator is assigned by the managed care organization. The managed care organization is the contracting insurance company that holds the Medicaid purse string, so to speak. So they assign somebody for individuals who are eligible for these waivers to kind of help manage their case on a more personal basis. Yes, but this person is not a replacement for the targeted case manager that a person can also receive through the IDD waiver.
It's good to know that there are many people who are there to support the families and the individual, and so it sounds just like another layer of help along the way.
As a end user, for my son is on the IDD waiver, and he has a targeted case manager and a care coordinator. And how I look at them is the care coordinator is more around, as Seth mentioned, the purse strings, but then anything that's really medical related. And then the targeted case manager is everything else. And it really does help a family keep their head above water as they're working, trying to survive, living their lives, have other children, taking care of their families. They can ask their targeted case manager, hey, I heard about XYZ resource. Can you go and research that for me, and then come back and let me know, does this work for my child? So they're kind of a lifesaver in that respect too, and that was my perspective.
That's great. And I think kind of the point of all this information that we're sharing is to help people understand what's available to them, to know that they're not alone. And if you are frustrated in one area, there's always another place you can turn to get some information. And so I also want to know, are there kind of standard questions that you get from families who are initiating this process and don't know where to start?
From a family support coordinator position, I get families coming to me all the time saying, I need help. Where can I go? What can I do? And unfortunately, I wish I could say, hey, here's the front door. Walk through this door and everything will be solved, and hold your hand through it all. But there's not that person at this point. So as I talk to families and try to figure out exactly where they need, if they need to get on the IDD waiver, which many of my families do need to do that, I send them to the CDDO right away. As they've mentioned, it's 2 days shy of a 9-year wait list. They can get on at the age of 5. I encourage families to do that. If they get to the end of the 9 years and they say, we don't really need the services, they can turn them down. But in 9 years, if you need those services, you're waiting another 9 years. So I always send them there. And it just depends on what their needs are. I get a lot of questions around IEPs. which are individual education plans through the school systems. My go-to partner for that is the Families Together Parent Training Information Center in the state of Kansas. So it just really depends on what their needs are.
Great information. All right, Seth and Mandy.
One of the big, I think, confusion for a lot of people coming through this process is the Medicaid piece. How these are, we've talked a lot about how these are Medicaid waivers to keep people out of institutions. People come to us, if you're familiar with Medicaid, at all, you kind of know that you've got to qualify for Medicaid, which does involve a financial component. You have to remain under a certain resource limit to actually get Medicaid. So then people hear, well, I don't qualify for Medicaid. How will I qualify for this waiver? Isn't that what it's funded by? How does that all work together? You can be on the waiting list without having Medicaid. So yes, an individual will eventually have to qualify for Medicaid in order to actually receive those services, unless, of course, they would like to private pay, at which point that is perfectly okay as well, if they've got the means to do that. However, with the way it kind of works is if you're a minor and your name comes up for to receive funding, let's say somebody applies at age 5, we get them on the waiting list. They don't have Medicaid yet. Then when they turn 14, again, they don't qualify for Medicaid. You go ahead and apply anyway. There's a box on the Medicaid application that indicates you are going to be receiving home and community-based services, at which point you get the Medicaid, because that's contingent on you receiving those HCBS funds or qualifying for the HCBS service. And then once you turn 18 and you're considered a legal adult separate from, your parents or your family, the responsible party, then you do have to meet those financial eligibility requirements. So yeah, it gets a little confusing. However, the bottom line is that you can be on the waiting list. You can still qualify for the IDD system and still be determined functionally eligible for the IDD waiver, even though you might not be financially eligible for Medicaid at the time.
All right, that makes sense. And Mandy, any thoughts on this?
I think that Stephanie and Seth hit both big things I hear right on the head. Families have a lot of questions about if I'm eligible, if my family's eligible, do we make too much money, things like that. And I always just assure people to check with the CDDO. We can help with that. Families Together is a great resource for IEPs. And really, parents will also ask, when should we start this process? And sometimes, we don't start at 5, because I don't know of too many families that start thinking about their child's future at age 5. So that transitional IEP, that's when families can really start working on what are the long-term objectives that my child wants to do. And I think the great piece about our program, this home and community-based services waiver, is I don't think there's anything too big. If a person wants to get a job and it doesn't seem like they have the skills to get a job, for lack of a better word, the team, the case manager, everyone will work together to break those goals down into smaller steps so they can achieve those goals. And yes, the insurance and all of that's very confusing, and we have CanCare that we can refer people to, and we'll try to assist as much as possible as well.
Right, that's a lot of great information. And just finally, if you could tell people where they need to go to start this process.
Oh, you can visit our website at jocogov.org/CDDO, and that'll take you directly to our website with all our contact information. If you would like, you can call 913-826-2600 to start the intake process, or if you just have questions or want to learn more about this, what we've talked about today, you can also email the individual in our office, my coworker, Gail Laurie, to start that intake process as well. Her email is Gail, GAIL.Laurie, LAURI @jocogov.org. You could call me or email me as well. I think Mandy's always open to receiving calls and emails and after hours, text messages, whatever you need.
That sounds good. And we'll, of course, have some links, maybe not to your home address or anything, but maybe to some helpful phone numbers and websites in the show notes of this episode. Stephanie, can you just wrap it up by telling us just a little bit about where people can go to access some of the resources that you guys have?
The web address is a lot longer and I don't have it memorized, but I can share a couple of places. Like I said, on Facebook, if you're on Facebook, you can go to Kansas Lend, just put in Kansas and LEND in the search box and it'll come up. Through there, you can always send us a message or ask questions. And then you can also email me. I do not work out of a office at the moment. I work from home. So the best way to reach me is by emailing me at scoleman3@kumc.edu. That's SCOLEMAN, the number 3 @kumc.edu. And I always try to help families navigate, whether they're patients of ours or not. I try to navigate them to the best proper resource.
All right, that's perfect. Well, thank you all so much for your time and all the great information. I'm sure that our listeners will benefit from it and receive the important information and services that they need.
You just heard JoCo on the Go. Join us next time for more Everything Johnson County. Have a topic you want to discuss? We want to hear from you. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at JoCoGov. For more on this podcast, visit jocogov.org/podcast. Thanks for listening.